This is not just a story. This is a feeling many mothers carry quietly, often unnoticed. It is a story of love, sacrifice, patience, and the subtle pain of being slowly forgotten. From the moment he was born, her world changed. Every heartbeat, every little cry, every tiny movement, she was there. She watched him sleep, worried about every breath. She watched him grow, guided him, loved him deeply, without expecting anything in return. Her heart swelled with joy at his first smile, at the first time he called her name. She sometimes wondered how anyone could hold that much love in a single chest. Every morning, she woke before dawn to prepare his breakfast. Every night, she stayed awake just a little longer to make sure he was safe. She learned his little habits, how he stirred in sleep, what made him giggle, what words made him cry. Every scraped knee, every fever, every broken toy became part of her world. She celebrated his victories quietly, comforted his failures without hesitation, and silently wished for his happiness every single day. She often remembered small, fleeting moments. The first time he ran to her, after learning to walk, holding her hands and laughing uncontrollably. The first time he spoke in full sentences, proudly telling her about something he discovered. The little battles over brushing his teeth, getting dressed, doing homework, each one leaving a memory she tucked away in her heart. She remembered them all and carried them like treasures. People often say, a son never forgets his mother. She believed that too. She believed in the bond they shared, a bond stronger than words, stronger than distance. She believed that love, when genuine, never fades. Years passed. The boy became a young man, independent, confident, ambitious. She watched him step into the world with pride and fear intertwined. She prayed for his success, his happiness, and even for his future wife, a woman who would love him, understand him, and walk beside him through life's challenges. The wedding day arrived. Guests laughed, smiled, and took countless photos. She stood quietly in the background, holding back emotions that threatened to spill over. Watching her son step into a new life, she told herself, this is how life works. Sons grow up, they build families. But deep inside, a tiny part of her wondered if she would still matter in the new life he was building. At first, the changes were almost invisible. Missed calls here, delayed visits there, shorter conversations. He's busy, she told herself. But over time, days turned into weeks, weeks into months. She stopped calling first, afraid of disturbing him. She stopped complaining, afraid of sounding needy. She stopped expecting, because expectations hurt the most when they are not met. She remembered afternoons spent in the quiet house, making his favorite snacks, and hoping he would call just to say hello. She remembered the evenings she spent watching the clock, imagining his smile, remembering how he once ran into her arms without a second thought. She remembered her prayers, whispered softly in the dark. For his health, for his happiness, for him to always know her love. The world around her moved on, but her world slowed down. People often ask, why don't mothers speak up? Because mothers know words can push people further away. Love quietly endures, even when it hurts, even when unnoticed. This story is not about blaming sons. It is about understanding what silence and distance do to a mother. Because forgetting does not always mean erasing someone from your life. Sometimes, forgetting means remembering them last, and that hurts the most. This story begins not with absence, but with love. The kind of love that shapes a life even before the first distance appears. It is a story of love, sacrifice, growth, and the quiet lessons that come when a son slowly learns what he once took for granted. If you are a son listening to this, ask yourself, when was the last time you really listened to your mother? And if you are a mother listening to this, know this. Your feelings are real, your pain is valid, and your love is never unnoticed. This is only the beginning. The boy grew quickly, faster than she could have imagined. Each day brought new challenges, new discoveries, and a little more independence. Yet, through it all, she was always there, quietly observing, gently guiding, and loving him without asking for anything in return. She remembered the first day he went to school. He clutched her hand tightly, his little legs trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. She whispered, "You will be okay, my love," even as her own chest tightened. She watched him walk through the school gate and felt a strange combination of pride and anxiety. Would he make friends? Would he be happy? Would he remember to come home for lunch? These thoughts lingered long after he disappeared into the crowd. Every afternoon, she waited for him at the doorstep, watching for the familiar backpack and the little bouncing steps. Sometimes he came running, laughing uncontrollably, with stories spilling out faster than she could catch. "Mom, look what I learned today," he would shout, and she would smile, nod, and listen as if each word were the most precious thing in the world. There were also quiet, ordinary moments. The way he would carefully line up his toys before bedtime, the soft hum of a tune he made up, the stubborn frown when he refused vegetables. She remembered holding his hand while he cried over scraped knees, comforting him when dreams seemed too big or fears too real. Every moment, even the tiny ones, mattered to her. School projects, first friends, little victories, and small failures. She was there for all of it. She celebrated quietly when he learned to ride a bike, cheering softly to give him confidence without making him nervous. She stayed up late helping with homework, making sure he understood every lesson. She remembered nights when he cried softly in the dark because of a bad dream, and she would stroke his hair and whisper, "I am here, always." Sometimes she would sit in the living room, watching him sleep, reflecting on how fast time passed. She remembered his first words, first steps, first laugh, first day at school, and she realized that every first was a little victory for both of them. She knew he would grow up, that he would become independent, that he would make his own choices. But she also knew that each day she spent loving him, quietly, built the foundation for the man he would become. Her sacrifices were small and unnoticed, yet they were endless. Every meal she prepared, every tear she wiped, every cheer she whispered, all of it mattered. People say childhood is short, and it is. But she tried to make every moment count, even the ordinary, invisible ones. She wanted him to grow with confidence, to know love, to feel security even when she wasn't around. And slowly, he did. By the time he became a teenager, she could see the subtle changes. His voice grew deeper, his steps longer, his gaze more distant. He no longer clutched her hand tightly at school gates. He began to spend more time with friends, more time away from home. And though it hurt her heart a little, she reminded herself, this is life. Children grow, they must. And through it all, she remained the same, silently proud, endlessly patient, and quietly loving. She understood that the boy she held in her arms as a newborn was now becoming the man he was meant to be, and she felt both joy and a bittersweet ache as she watched him step toward the world beyond her reach. The boy was no longer a child. His laughter was louder, his dreams bigger, and his world a little farther from home. He had grown taller, stronger, and more confident, and she noticed the subtle changes every day. The hand that once clutched hers tightly now brushed past hers without a thought. The soft words of childhood had been replaced by hurried sentences, impatient gestures, and the quiet rebellion of a teenager. She remembered the first time he argued with her. He wanted to go out with friends instead of helping at home. His voice, once timid, was now firm, bordering on defiance. Her heart ached, but she stayed calm. She remembered thinking, this is part of growing up. I cannot stop it. I must let him learn. She smiled, nodded, and let him go, even when she wanted to hold him close and never let him leave. School became a battleground of achievements and anxieties. Tests, projects, sports, competitions, the boy threw himself into every challenge. She quietly prepared his favorite meals, made sure his uniform was clean, and reminded him of deadlines. But she also noticed the small distances growing, the fleeting glances, the short answers, the quiet moments when he retreated to his room without explanation. Evenings were quieter. The boy no longer lingered at the dinner table. Conversations were shorter, often about homework or friends. She felt a gentle ache every time she asked about his day and received a shrug in return. Yet she reminded herself that this was natural. Children grow, they pull away to build their own world. She accepted it, though silently, a part of her ached every time. She remembered the first time he stayed out late, coming home just before the streetlights turned on. He was exhilarated, tired, and smiling. He shared stories with his friends, not with her. And yet, she felt a quiet pride. He was becoming independent, learning life beyond the walls she had created for him. She reflected on every sacrifice she had made, the sleepless nights, the small comforts she had given up, and realized they were working. He was growing into the man she had hoped he would be. But with growth came more distance. Phone calls were shorter. Visits home were less frequent. He began making decisions without consulting her. She watched silently, understanding the necessity of letting go, but also feeling the sting of absence. She remembered his first heartbreak when a girl at school disappointed him. He came to her quietly, but now with hesitation, unsure how much he should share. She held him close, whispered words of comfort, and let him know that love, even when it hurt, was never lost. And yet, there were moments that reminded her of the child he once was. The way he would pause to help a neighbor, the way he laughed when a joke reminded him of something silly from childhood, or the way he still sought her advice when life felt uncertain. Those moments brought warmth to her heart, proof that the bond they shared was still unbroken, though subtly changed. She often reflected late at night on the fleeting years. Childhood had gone quickly, and now independence demanded her patience. She realized that the boy she had nurtured, protected, and guided was stepping into a world she could not always reach. And though the ache of distance grew, so did a quiet pride. He was learning life just as she had hoped. She understood that independence did not mean rejection. It did not mean the bond was broken. It meant growth. And though it was painful at times, it was necessary. She had loved him enough to let him go, even when it left her nights long and quiet. The wedding day was a whirlwind of colors, sounds, and emotions. Guests laughed, photographers clicked, and the boy stood tall in a suit that made him look like the man he had become. She watched him carefully, noticing every smile, every nervous glance, every tiny adjustment of his tie. Her heart swelled with pride, yet a small ache lingered. This was the day he would officially step into a world she could not fully reach. She remembered the first moment she saw his bride. She smiled politely, observing the gentle kindness in her eyes, hoping that this woman would love him, understand him, and cherish the bond he had with his mother. She whispered a silent prayer, asking that this marriage would bring happiness to her son, even if it meant she would have to step back a little. During the ceremony, she stood quietly at the side, absorbing the laughter, the music, and the fragrant air of flowers that filled the hall. She noticed his hands trembling slightly as he exchanged vows. Memories flashed through her mind. The first steps, the first words, the scraped knees, the first day of school. And she realized that each of these moments had led to this one. Her heart swelled, but she kept her emotions in check, smiling for the cameras, while feeling a quiet weight pressing on her chest. After the wedding, life began to change subtly. The boy, now a husband, had new responsibilities. Calls became shorter, visits less frequent. Conversations that once lasted for hours were now limited to a few sentences. She told herself, he is busy. He has a new life. This is natural. But deep inside, she felt the sting of absence, a quiet reminder that her place in his daily life was shifting. She remembered one evening vividly. The phone rang late, and she picked it up eagerly, expecting his familiar voice. Instead, it was hurried, polite, distant. "I'm busy, Mom. I'll call later." Her heart sank, though she spoke nothing. She knew he did not mean to hurt her. He was just caught up in the whirlwind of his new life. And yet, the silence after the call was louder than any words could have been. She reflected on the mornings when she would prepare his favorite meals in anticipation of a visit that never came. The little details she had once shared, stories from his childhood, jokes they laughed at together, quiet talks about dreams, was slowly replaced by brief check-ins and polite conversation. She reminded herself that this was a natural transition, but it did not make it any easier. The boy, for his part, was unaware of the subtle ache his mother felt. He was building a life, juggling responsibilities, and trying to balance love for his wife with care for his family. Yet the small gestures he once made for his mother, a phone call, a question, a shared memory, became rarer. The bond they shared was still there, but stretched thin by distance and the demands of a new life. She often sat quietly in her living room, remembering his childhood laughter, his small victories, and the tiny acts of love he once shared. She recalled how he used to run to her after school, how he would cling to her during storms, how he sought comfort in her arms without hesitation. Now she waited, silently hoping for glimpses of that boy she had raised, moments of connection, even if brief. And yet, despite the growing distance, she never stopped loving him. She understood that life was changing, that sons grew up, that marriages required attention and care. But she also knew that love, even when stretched thin, never disappears. It waits, it hopes, it endures. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for both of them. A chapter where love remained constant, even as life demanded adjustments, even as small gaps began to form, and even as silence occasionally replaced conversation. She understood that distance did not mean abandonment, it meant growth, change, and the quiet challenge of remaining connected when life pulled them apart. The house felt emptier than ever. The laughter that once echoed through the halls was now a memory, soft and distant. She moved from room to room, performing the same tasks she always had, yet each act felt heavier. Preparing a meal, tidying up, watering the plants, every gesture reminded her of the small moments she used to share with him, moments that were now gone. She remembered mornings when he would rush to the kitchen, still half asleep, asking for toast or milk, smiling as she handed it to him. Afternoons spent helping with homework, evenings reading stories together, all those tiny fragments of daily life had vanished almost imperceptibly. Now, she found herself pausing mid-task, imagining him walking through the door even though she knew it would not happen. Sometimes she would sit by the window for hours, staring at the street, watching children play, recalling the days when her son had been one of them. She could still picture his small figure, the way he ran without fear, the way he stumbled, got up, and ran again. A pang of longing gripped her chest, yet she smiled softly, knowing that growth demanded distance, even if it hurt. Evenings were the hardest. The quiet settled over the house like a heavy blanket. The phone sat beside her, silent. She checked it repeatedly, almost out of habit. She knew the calls would come late, if at all. Each time the phone rang and it wasn't him, she felt a sharp sting, a reminder of the distance that had grown between them. But she never complained. She never demanded. She had learned that love could endure even when it was unseen, unspoken, and quiet. Memories flooded her mind. The first scraped knee, the first lost tooth, the first heartbreak over a childhood friend. Every small crisis had once been hers to soothe, and now she was left with echoes. She thought about the little things, how he liked his pajamas folded in a certain way, how he hummed while doing homework, how he clutched his blanket at night, and a soft ache lingered. Even with the distance, she found ways to stay connected in small, invisible ways. She left notes in his room, tucked away small reminders of home, and sometimes baked his favorite cookies, sending them quietly, hoping he would feel her presence. Each act was a whisper of love, a bridge over the growing gap, a reminder that though he might be far, he was always remembered. She understood that this quiet pain was not caused by neglect, anger, or resentment. It was caused by love, the kind of love that grows silently, waits patiently, and endures even when the world shifts around it. She realized that motherhood was not about control, but about letting go, even when letting go brought its own heartache. Some nights she allowed herself to cry softly, alone in the dark, not out of despair, but out of longing, nostalgia, and the weight of a love that had been constant, unchanging, yet increasingly distant. She remembered the times he had fallen asleep on her shoulder, the times he had called her name in the middle of the night, the times he had clung to her during storms of every kind. Those memories were treasures, yet they were tinged with sorrow, proof of what had been and what had subtly drifted away. And still, she continued. She continued to love without expectation, to wait without complaint, to hope without demand. She knew that the bond they shared was stronger than distance, and that one day her quiet patience would be understood. This was the heart of her life now. Small acts, silent love, quiet hope, and the enduring ache of a mother whose son had grown, whose world had changed, but whose love had never wavered. It began as a small thought, almost unnoticed, a fleeting memory of his childhood, the sound of her voice calling him for breakfast, the way she used to tuck him in at night, the way she smiled whenever he achieved something new. For years, he had been busy. School, college, work, friends, and now his own family. He had told himself that his mother would always be there, that she would understand, that she would forgive him for being busy, for forgetting small gestures, for drifting away. But one quiet evening, alone in his living room, he felt the weight of absence. He remembered the mornings she had stayed up to make sure he had breakfast, the nights she had watched over him while he slept, the countless little sacrifices he had barely noticed. Suddenly, her love felt immense, almost overwhelming, and a sharp pang of guilt pierced him. He realized how little he had done to stay connected, how easily he had allowed distance to grow. He remembered the tiny things he had taken for granted, the way she hummed while cooking, the soft laughter she made when he did something silly, the gentle reprimands that guided him without hurting him. And now those moments were memories, not everyday life. He realized that he had been living his life fully, yes, but without remembering the one person who had been there from the very beginning, the one person who had shaped him into who he was. Phone calls came to mind. How often had he picked up and spoken briefly, distracted, thinking of other tasks? How often had he forgotten to call, forgetting that a small conversation could mean the world to her? A deep ache filled his chest as he remembered her patience, her quiet love, her silent endurance of his growing distance. One evening, he found himself looking through old photos, pictures of his childhood, birthdays, school events, small achievements. She was always there, quietly smiling, always present, always proud. His eyes filled with tears as he realized that while he had been busy building a life, she had been quietly carrying the weight of missing him without complaint. Guilt pressed heavily upon him, mingled with longing. He wanted to reach out, to call, to visit, to make up for all the little moments he had missed. He wanted to hear her laugh, to see her smile, to feel the warmth of her love again. And yet, he hesitated, afraid that too much time had passed, that he had already hurt her too deeply. But the truth was clear. No distance, no matter how long, could erase the bond they shared. Memories of childhood, guidance, laughter, and quiet love remained, waiting for recognition. He realized that love had always been there, patient and enduring, even when he had overlooked it. That night he sat quietly, thinking of all the small gestures he could make: a call, a visit, a heartfelt message. He understood that love required attention, that relationships required effort, that a mother's heart, though strong, needed acknowledgement. He promised himself that he would bridge the distance slowly, gently, with patience and care, just as she had always been patient with him. He reflected on the years he had taken for granted, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a mix of regret and hope. Regret for the lost moments and hope that the bond, though stretched, could be renewed. He realized that love, when true, never fades. It waits, it forgives, it endures. In that moment, he understood the quiet truth of his mother's life. Her love had been unwavering, her patience unending, her hope constant, and now it was his turn to honor that love, to step closer, to listen, and to rebuild the bond that had always existed beneath the surface. Change does not happen all at once. It begins quietly, with small realizations, tiny decisions, and subtle efforts. The son had felt the weight of distance, the ache in his mother's absence, and now he was ready to make things right. Slowly, gently, without forcing it, without expecting it to happen overnight. He began with small gestures, a call in the morning, a quick message asking how she was, a little attention to her day. At first it felt awkward, almost foreign. He had grown so used to the busy rhythm of his own life that slowing down to notice someone else, even someone who had given him everything, felt strange. But as he continued, he began to notice her reactions, the small smiles, the warmth in her voice, the soft glimmer in her eyes that reminded him of childhood mornings and quiet nights. He realized that love is not just about grand gestures, but about consistency, attention, and patience. A phone call, a visit, a shared story. These small acts could rebuild the connection that had slowly faded. He began to reflect on the moments he had missed, birthdays celebrated quietly alone, meals she had prepared in anticipation of his visit, little memories waiting to be remembered. And he promised himself he would honor them, moving forward. His wife became part of this effort, gently guiding him and offering support. She understood the importance of family, the depth of a mother's love, and the quiet patience required to repair distance. Together, they began to balance their life, sharing responsibilities, planning visits, and creating moments where the mother felt included in their lives. These were not forced gestures, but acts of love, understanding, and respect for the bond that had always existed. One afternoon, he visited her unexpectedly, bringing her favorite snack and sitting down to simply talk. They spoke of memories, of old adventures, of small joys, and unnoticed sacrifices. She laughed softly at the stories he remembered incorrectly, and he smiled at the memories she recalled with vivid detail. In that moment, the distance that had grown over the years began to shrink, not erased entirely, but softened, bridged by conversation, reflection, and quiet presence. He began to notice the small things, how her eyes lit up when he shared something new about his life, how her hands moved with the same care they always had, how her voice carried the same warmth that had nurtured him for years. He realized that rebuilding the bond required attention to these details, small gestures of care that reminded her and himself that love never truly fades. Evenings were spent sharing memories and laughter. The stories of childhood, school days, and teenage adventures returned to life, each recollection strengthening the connection between them. He realized that life was not about perfection or grand gestures, but about showing up consistently, lovingly, and patiently. Slowly, balance returned. The son understood that his life with his wife, his responsibilities, and his ambitions could coexist with his love and attention for his mother. The gap that had seemed unbridgeable began to narrow, one small act at a time. And in those moments, both mother and son rediscovered the warmth, trust, and quiet joy that had always existed beneath the surface. He learned that love is not a single event, but a continuous effort. And in learning that, he found peace. Peace in being present, in being attentive, in being a son who had finally remembered what mattered most. Time has a way of teaching lessons quietly. It does not announce its lessons with fanfare. Instead, it moves gently, leaving moments for reflection, choices for growth, and spaces for understanding. The son had begun to understand, truly understand, the depth of his mother's love, the patience that had quietly guided him, and the sacrifices she had made, often without recognition. Their relationship was no longer measured by absence or missed calls, but by presence, even in small, quiet ways. A call to check in, a message to share a memory, a visit to sit together and simply talk. Each act became a thread, weaving their connection stronger, mending the subtle gaps that had formed over time. The mother too reflected on this journey. She had watched him grow, given him the space to build his life, and endured the quiet ache of distance. And now, seeing his effort, she felt a profound sense of joy. Not the loud joy of celebrations or applause, but the quiet, steady warmth that comes from knowing love has endured and been recognized. They spent afternoons reminiscing. She told him stories he had forgotten, small incidents from his childhood, moments that had shaped him without him noticing. He laughed, apologized softly for the times he had been distant, and promised to remain attentive and present. And in that shared laughter and conversation, something shifted. Distance was no longer a shadow over their bond. It had been transformed into a gentle reminder of the value of presence, patience, and love. He also began to understand the life she had led quietly, her moments of solitude, her careful balance of patience and hope, her endurance through years of silent longing. He realized that the love of a mother is never absent, even when it is not seen. It waits, it forgives, it endures, and he felt a deep responsibility to honor it, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, respect, and genuine love. The mother, in turn, reflected on the journey of letting go, the quiet strength it had given her, and the subtle beauty of watching a child grow into a responsible, compassionate adult. She realized that motherhood is not just about protection or guidance, but also about trust, patience, and the quiet hope that one day the child will return, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, to the bond that shaped their earliest years. There were tears, yes, tears of recognition, tears of love, and even tears of quiet relief. But there was also laughter, small joys, and the gentle warmth of connection restored. They both understood that love is not measured in proximity, in frequency, or in grand gestures. It is measured in attention, respect, patience, and the willingness to bridge gaps, even when time or circumstances create distance. And so their story reached a quiet, profound understanding. The son had learned the value of presence. The mother had seen her love recognized, and together they discovered that true love endures all distance, time, and even forgetfulness, because it is patient, selfless, and eternal. If you are a son listening to this story, ask yourself, how often do you take your mother's love for granted? How often do you assume she will always be there without remembering that every moment counts? And if you are a mother listening to this, remember this. Your love is seen. Your sacrifices are valued. Your patience, though quiet, shapes lives in ways the world may never notice. But your child will always carry your love in their heart. This is the end of the story. Not the end of love, not the end of connection, but the beginning of understanding, reflection, and enduring care.